What's up there, everyone? My name is Comedian. You might have noticed that the headphones are off, the gloves are off, so to speak, and that's because today I want to talk about mental health more directly than just talking about it indirectly through reactions to songs that deal with mental health. And specifically today I want to talk about self-doubt, insecurity, that kind of stuff. Things I'm dealing with a lot recently, but things I think that pretty much everyone can relate to, or maybe could benefit from hearing about. I myself can definitely relate to it. I'm experiencing self-doubt right now, as we speak, in fact. This sucks.
Why are you filming
Boring.
this?
Comedian, you cut yourself shaving yesterday, so you didn't film yesterday, and today you're filming, but
You're going to spend hours
even
making
worse.
this.
What's
and
up with
you're gonna
that?
get 0 views. Great job.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. So yeah, that's what it's like inside my brain quite a lot, and if you can relate to that, then don't worry, you aren't alone. It's a pretty common human experience, I think. But to get more specific and to pretend that this is, actually educational, informational, and sensible, let's try and define self-doubt for a second. What is self-doubt? Now, according to Merriam-Webster, who are the last word in words, the last word in noises to come out of your mouth for some reason, you'd have to ask cavemen about, self-doubt is a lack of faith in oneself, a feeling of doubt or uncertainty about one's abilities, actions, etc., which is pretty self-explanatory. But self-doubt can manifest itself in a million different ways. Now, I don't want this video to be just me, complaining about my issues, or to come off like that. I mean, as much as complaining is just brilliant, everyone loves complaining, especially English people, and as much as it can feel therapeutic to have a good whinge, I want this to be more relatable and to help people tackle a subject that they might be going through themselves. But also, I just don't want to be a massive downer. I don't want to come off like somebody who just complains, especially because, we're on YouTube and that kind of content is what drives people away. Don't go anywhere. I'm begging you. No need for that, because I'm cool, I'm hip, I'm the sort of people that you want to click subscribe on for some reason. I got it, I know what's going on. I don't lie awake at night thinking about views, that would be lame. But no, I want to relate this video to my own experiences because I'm the one saying the stuff. But, this translates to so many different ways. And everyone can relate to this because everyone goes through this. Self-doubt is like a mental cancer that just eats into the fiber of your very being. And although some people suffer from it to a great degree less to everyone else, I don't think anyone truly is impervious to it. I'm sure we can all think of, friends we might have who just seem to be endlessly happy, endlessly confident, don't seem to doubt themselves at all. Even those people, if you actually take the time to talk to them rather than just sitting there and being really annoyed at how happy and well put together they seem to be, they'll tell you that they have stuff that they very much doubt themselves for too. Now, I think a lot of self-doubt, I should put a big word of caution here, a big caveat, warning, not a therapist, not a scientist, barely even a human, technically. But I think a lot of what manifests itself as self-doubt very much goes back to childhood, childhood experiences. I think a lot of people begin learning to doubt themselves when they're younger. I don't think anyone pops out of the birth canal like, you know what, I think I'm rubbish. I doubt there's any babies out there being like, when is my hair going to come in? It's not a natural way of being necessarily. I think self-doubt is something that you start to apply to yourself once you start looking at yourself through the lens that society builds for you. And self-doubt can manifest itself in, a billion different ways, like I said. Intelligence, creativity, looks, body image, sexuality maybe, accomplishments, what flavor of yogurt you like the most. There's just so much stuff. I think for a lot of people, self-doubt starts in childhood. It starts the very first time that your kind of like perfect, optimistic, trouble-free worldview is shattered by, somebody making a weird comment, something not going your way, being bullied or something, experiencing some kind of trauma or abuse at a young age. These are things that many of us can relate to a different degree. For me personally, I think my self-doubt started in childhood, especially with the rampant bullying I received as a child. You might be surprised to learn that, considering, how cool I look. The top button is done up. I just look really hip. I look like I might, turn into Superman at any second. But yes, I was once, a massive nerd. And I used to be bullied relentlessly as a child, like to a really quite insane degree. I also had family troubles growing up, and I dealt with a lot of emotional abuse as a kid, which is something, I still am working through with a crack team of therapists, hundreds of therapists, millions of doctors trying to figure out why my brain is But the thing is, self-doubt, insecurities, it's such an incessant, ridiculous human condition that I even used to have, and still do to some degree, but used to have even self-doubt about my problems, because I used to like try and join depression forums or something, and I would read about people who had childhoods that I would, I thought, oh my goodness, like I had nothing that horrible happen to me as a child. Like, my problems are nothing. But that isn't how the brain works. That isn't how the human psyche works. And that isn't how self-doubt works. Self-doubt can be as simple as somebody telling you you're no good at something when you put all your confidence in it, when you put all your stake in it. Now, a while back, I did actually trauma therapy. And I think one of the most important things I learned in trauma therapy is that, there's no such thing as like worse trauma. Like, trauma is trauma. And when bad things happen to you, you react to them. It's as simple as that. I feel like I can remember, not like the exact moment that I switched from being a really extroverted, bubbly person, because believe it or not, as a kid, like I was the most extroverted child running around. And I remember the feeling of suddenly thinking to myself, wait a second, like people are mean. Like, what is this? Like, I'm running out here trying to be myself and people are being mean to me for it. And I retreated inside my own shell so hard that I could have put hermit crabs to shame. Let's put it that way. So that's why, in a way, I believe that, self-doubt starts in childhood. It's not as simple as that. There's many factors to it, but I think a big degree of it comes down to childhood experiences. But in reality, we stay forever children. We stay forever, like, developing, forever learning. I just think when you're young, you can lose a certain sense of innocence, and people can sort of take it away from you. Which is why it's kind of interesting that we call it self-doubt, because in a way, a lot of the times, the self-doubt we have is actually an external source giving us those kind of thoughts. This is something I realized a few years ago, was that a lot of the times when I had these harsh self-criticisms, when I found myself talking down to myself, it wasn't in the first person. To a degree that I started to think, am I schizophrenic? Which luckily, if you're out and you've ever had that thought, am I schizophrenic? Pretty much the chances are, if you think to yourself, am I schizophrenic? Then the answer is, no, you aren't, because people who are unfortunate enough to suffer from schizophrenia don't tend to have that sort of self-reflection of, am I schizophrenic? That's not typically how that works. It's a very common, anxiety thing to have, is to start talking to yourself in the third person and then believe you are in fact schizophrenic. Not how it works, but what I do think it is proof of, talking to yourself in the third person, especially putting yourself down in the third person, scolding yourself. I think, again, it goes back to childhood. It's, it's repeating words you heard as a kid. It's learned patterns of behavior. Humans are nothing if not, animals that just feast on patterns of behavior. We need patterns. We need patterns of sleep. We need patterns of meals, of eating, patterns of exercise, patterns of socializing. We need patterns to keep living, to keep moving forwards. Like, life in a trippy sort of way, in a hippy-dippy sort of way, is one big pattern, which is great because pattern is a word you can just throw and apply to anything, really. But, life is a big pattern in a sense, and especially as kids, we're so susceptible. We take on those patterns. We take on learned patterns of behavior. If you raise a child in a cage, which you absolutely shouldn't do, let me be very clear on that in case anyone was taking this as, but just for the sake of argument, you raise a child in a cage, but the cage is, let's say, a cave. You raise a child in a cave, and you never tell the child never sees the sky, and you tell the child that the sky is orange, and you keep them at the age of 4. This is really horrible. I should stop talking about this before somebody starts investigating me. But just a blank slate, keep them away from reality and tell them the sky is orange. They will believe the sky is orange for the rest of their life. Even if you try and prove to them the sky is blue, they'll have a hard time changing that. And that is the way human mind works. In a way, human minds are so malleable, especially the younger we are. But in another way, we can be so fixed in our ways. And the point I'm trying to make, in a very roundabout way, and, again, the self-doubt is coming in here. This is unraveling. What point were you making again? This is a massive topic. Why don't you just sit and talk about it for hours and not really make any point? Oh, I know. I've got a great idea. I'm a comedian. I've got ADHD. Let me try and sum up a really complex topic in about 10 minutes. Right. Cool. Thanks, me. Anyway, what I'm getting at here is that when I talk about self-doubt as a cancer, a kind of disease that just eats away, it's also a transmissible disease. It's a disease that's spread from person to person. If somebody is negative towards you, if somebody says you can't do that, they're not doing that out of nowhere. They're not doing it out of the blue. They're doing that because somebody else did that to them. People pass on their patterns of behavior. People pass on negative experiences. It's not healthy, but it is a very instinctive human behavior to just pass on negative experiences. So going back to my earlier pattern of thought, which I almost lost sight of, I realized there was a period, I realized a few years ago that I was basically scolding myself in the third person all the time. It wasn't like, what am I doing? It was, what are you doing? You're an idiot. you shouldn't be doing this. You're lazy. You're a waste of space. You. And that could not be any more of a clear sign. That's not me saying that. I'm definitely not schizophrenic, despite my silly anxiety about it. So it's pretty clear then that a voice in my head saying you isn't actually my voice. It's someone else's voice that I've picked up on. So then why am I speaking about this? Because some of this feels kind of obvious, although that might just be my own self-doubts and insecurities telling me that things that I've sat down and spent a long time thinking about are obvious, which might not necessarily be the case for everyone. I'm speaking about this because recently I've been dealing with self-doubt more harshly than in a while, I think. And it's really, it's quite ridiculous on the face of it. From now, in a slightly better frame of mind, I can look back on it and be like, well, that was silly. But that's the nature of self-doubt. It's very hard to be in the present while it's happening and to think to yourself, well, these anxieties I'm having that are causing my thoughts to spin out of control and causing me to feel negative and down, that's silly. Sweep that away. It's the same mentality as somebody saying, cheer up to a depressed person, or chill out to an anxious person. It's nice in practice, but it doesn't work, and it's really quite annoying. So recently, for whatever reason, my videos have just been getting less views. And rather than just think to myself, look at the big picture, which is that YouTube is a complete minefield of just mayhem, that trying to get yourself noticed on YouTube is like going into, Times Square and New Year's Eve with a small, tiny little horn that goes beep, and just squeezing that thing repeatedly and hoping you eventually draw a large crowd. Like, it's a ridiculous avenue to try and succeed in. Arguably, it's probably one of the most mentally dangerous and toxic avenues to try and succeed in for people who do have low self-esteem. But then, ironically enough, the people with lower self-esteem are usually the ones that want to try and prove themselves by being on videos. Well, thanks for that, me. I feel exposed. Whatever. So yeah, it's a whole crazy feedback loop. And again, ironically enough, there are probably people out there who might have smaller channels, or who might be starting out new, or who might even be doing this for longer and say, well, you're doing better than me. What could you possibly have to complain about? And it's the thing I was talking about earlier. It's situational. The wider context is irrelevant. It's the smaller context that's relevant. And because I am, a person, as much as it pains me to admit it, I couldn't think about it logistically, robotically. I couldn't think to myself, well, this will get better, or well, this is just, a thing, or well, you took a small break to move and then another small break for Christmas, so it might just be a slow reflection of that. Whatever it is, or even just, it doesn't matter, it'll get better, keep going. Instead, I'm there thinking, my God, my videos have gotten terrible, I've lost it, my content's bad now, my thumbnails are terrible, my description is bad, my tags are bad. If I could just change one word in a title, I'd get millions of views. But the reason I felt like sitting down and talking about this is because I want to come through the other side of it, and I want to share, hopefully, some useful knowledge with people that are going through this. Even now, I can say, oh, I'm over it, but I'm over like a bump of it being worse. It's not like it's gone away. But the things that I have learned as, I've gotten older as a person, as I've gotten more adult, whatever that means, more mature, whatever that means, is that reality is a concept. And again, that sounds like some bonkers, like hippie stuff to say. But reality is a very kind of shaky concept, Think about as a kid when you read about how owls have crazy eyes and rabbits have crazy noses. I'm talking about rabbits. I have rabbits. That's focus. But even just the way we see the world isn't like the way to see the world. We see like a fraction of the visible spectrum of light. If we could actually physically see everything that there was to see in front of us, our brains would probably explode. It's probably too much data for our brains to handle. And you can say the same thing about smell, taste, vision. Like, we see exactly what our brains allow us to see, and that isn't the full picture. And our subconscious plays a huge role in this, because our subconscious is what tells us the difference between a lovely summery valley with lavender on it being a nice relaxing place, and a dark alleyway being some scary horrible place. There's no, if both places are empty and there's nothing actually scary going on in either of them, there's no real difference to feel differently between the two. It's our brain and its interpretation of the world entirely that defines how we feel in any given moment. And that applies to negative thinking. It applies to positive thinking too, but I'm not here to talk about positive thinking. If I ever manage to get back into a realm of thinking positively most of the time, I'll happily talk about it. But right now, this is relevant to me to negative thinking. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because sometimes it can be really useful to sit back and realize that your negative thoughts aren't real. They're real in the sense that you're experiencing them, but they aren't real. They don't dictate how the world is. If you've ever been, I have this problem all the time. I think it goes back to the bullying as a child, but I am so on edge about people laughing, which is ridiculous because, I do comedy a lot. I've done comedy on stage and stuff before, but this is a different, I'm talking about being in public and hearing people kind of just talking in the background and them laughing. And I'm less bad at it now, but as a kid, it was always, they're laughing at me. They are laughing at me. They are talking about me and laughing at me. And it felt so real. And even now it occasionally feels real, but it isn't real, like it's sad because, hearing a group of people laughing should be a positive thing. It should be like, oh, it's nice that they're having fun. Those bastards having fun around me who's not having fun, but it should be a positive thing, that they're having a good time. But instead, my brain is telling me they're having a good time at your expense, which is ridiculous. 99.9 billion times out of 10, that isn't true. And you can apply that logic to so many other things. More specifically with the self-doubt and insecurity, the amount of times, we as people think to ourselves like, this work is rubbish, or, this is no good, this art I just made is terrible. Like, that isn't real. Like, that is the worst, the most negative part of your brain, your biggest fears coming out. It doesn't define reality. So I think it's important to remember when you are experiencing self-doubt, when you are experiencing insecurity, that it isn't necessarily real. It might feel real, but it isn't necessarily real. And sometimes sharing that experience with somebody else, like I'm doing here today, can make the difference between realizing what's real or not, as in what is just what you are thinking and what is what everyone else might be thinking. Because the reality is, we are typically, by far and away, our own worst critics. Like, nobody out there will ever judge you as harshly as you will. Nobody out there will ever be as mean to you about some flaws you have as you will. And even if in a roundabout way, you took those things on from somebody else, it still comes from your inner voice, and it still can be very crushing, and it can still make it feel like your world is falling apart when you have all these thoughts about yourself, because like I said, your brain defines how you feel in any given moment. So if you suddenly start attacking yourself mentally, it wreaks havoc on your whole day, let's face it. So there's no easy fix, there's no easy cure. Sadly, I wasn't born 100 years in the future where you take one pill and it goes into your brain with nanobots, Iron Man style, and just fixes all the connectors and receptors, and you suddenly are like, I feel great about myself and the world I live in. I don't know if there's going to be, enough of a world left to do that in 100 years' time, but that's a whole different topic. So there's no easy fix, like a lot of stuff for mental health, but the step towards self-acceptance, the step towards self-growth is really realizing that not everything you think is real. And honestly, that logic is one of the biggest revelations I've had as I've gotten older, and you can apply it to so many things, but a good place to start is with how you view yourself, whether it be looking in the mirror, whether it be looking at your own grades, whether it be looking at your work, looking at your achievements. Like, if you're the sort of person who is prone to putting yourself down, that doesn't mean it's real. Just as there are all people out there, we know people out there who are prone to putting themselves up, to bigging themselves up, to talking themselves up when they might actually not, be more kind of, more mouth, less show. Doesn't mean that that's real either. But this video isn't about those people. I don't know if they would listen, even if somebody tried to tell them anyway. So anyway, I just want to wrap this up by saying, don't forget, we are all in this together. And in a roundabout way, I think what I was saying earlier is that you can sometimes work through this stuff by asking somebody else, like, yeah, what I'm thinking right now, is that normal? Like, is that real? Because very often it can take somebody else to be like, oh, what are you talking about? You look lovely. Or what are you talking about? This work is fantastic, And it's always okay to ask for help. The only time it isn't okay to ask for help is if you are the sort of person who resolutely and completely refuses to help anyone else. But if you're happy to help people, then it's always okay to ask for help yourself. Anyway, thanks for coming to this weird little TED talk. I hope I made some sense in that. I'm worried that I probably made the same point about 50 times with 10 different words. But that's kind of like my whole thing. So if you're here, you probably appreciate that. And yeah, I think talking about mental health is a thing that I'm passionate about anyway. Obviously, I end up doing it a lot, just, coincidentally in my videos. And I've been wanting to just do videos, getting straight to the meat, just talking right about it for a while now. So I'm glad that I finally was inspired by my own, woes, as it were, to sit down and do it. That being said, I want to keep doing these if you guys like them. So If you have any topics that you think I could cover in a future video, please let me know. Eventually, if this keeps being worthwhile, I would love to do like Agony Uncle, Agony Robot style videos and directly address people's problems maybe in my own way. I'd have to have a massive disclaimer saying do not take any of my advice, but it would be fun and interesting and quite wholesome, I think. But for now, if you guys have any topics you think you'd like me to see me talk about, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. But I hope you have a great day and you go out there and you remember that the world is often a much lighter and brighter place than we realize. You know what, I'd like to believe that the world is actually a beautifully, blissfully lit cave, and in one small corner there is just a little bit of darkness, and sometimes we feel drawn towards that darkness. But it doesn't reflect what the actual cave is about. And if anyone knows what that means, please PM me and let me know. Thanks for coming, guys. Like I said, hope you're all doing great out there. I'll see you again for more random videos. Bye! Forgot to make myself a drink.